And welcome on back, everybody, to the Postgame Pod here on the Auburn Undercover podcast. Nathan King, joined by Patrick Bingham, for the last time this season. Auburn's magical run, no doubt the best season in program history, has finally come to a close tonight in the Final Four here in the Alamo Dome. 79-73, the Tigers go down to the Florida Gators. We knew this was going to be a really difficult matchup for them because Florida had already come into Neville Arena this season, of course, and won. Florida had been a team that was extremely impressive in the month of March. I believe they've won now 17 of their last 18 overall. They are still undefeated in the month of March, now going in, if you include the beginning of April here. And Patrick, it's tough to even start and not talk about Walter Clayton here. It's tough to even move on to any sort of game analysis. But Auburn knew the challenge that was at hand with him. He scores 34 points in this game. I looked it up I saw a stat after the game. He is the first player since Larry Bird in 1979 to have back-to-back 30-point games in the Elite Eight in the Final Four.
Was he good?
Yeah, he was fun. And so that just kind of goes to show obviously what Auburn ran into today. But the thing is, Patrick, even if you had Walter Clayton doing all of that, it feels like if Auburn had just cleaned up some of their mess on the offensive end, they would have had a much better chance to win this game. So perhaps it was going to take an uncharacteristic performance like this for Auburn's season to end, and certainly they weren't happy with that at all because 12 turnovers in the second half, only making 8 shots. It's just not what we had come to expect from this team on offense this season.
Yeah, that was the thing. Is like, and we'll talk about the second half and all the stats that were doing so well and just all flipped. But there were several moments in the second half where I looked over at the people next to me and I was like, just vibes and like watching this game, you would think Florida's up 10. And Walter Clayton's hitting all these crazy shots, and yet Florida was only up like 1 or 2 until really about the 2-minute-ish mark when they like went up 6 and it was basically over.
Correct.
But for so much of that second half, even when Florida was taking over, Auburn was in striking distance the entire time. So I was still kind of waiting for the okay, but like when is Auburn gonna hit the big three and kind of go on their last run and bounce back? And obviously they never really did. But that's kind of the thing, and I guess we'll talk about that second half for a second of points in the paint. Auburn was doubling them up at the half and didn't have many the rest of the way. Rebounding, Auburn was up 1, Florida plus 10 in the second half in rebounding. Florida ends up getting 12 offensive rebounds. I thought the most telling thing, you talked about 12 turnovers for Auburn. Florida ended up they led with 16. Auburn had 14. But Auburn, on those 16 turnovers, only created 6 points. Yep. On Auburn's 14 turnovers, Florida creates 16 points for themselves. Yep. And so it's even in those transitional moments, and we saw it a lot in the second half. I mean, Florida, they're number 2 in the country in fast break coming into today's game. They didn't even get their first fast break point until
second half. Yeah.
The second half to take the lead for the first time in a while.
Yeah.
And so that was just kind of the thing is Auburn still limited them in a lot of things they did great. Walter Clayton just has an insane performance, and then Auburn makes uncharacteristic mistakes down the stretch, and their season comes to an end. Yeah,
and I think Auburn defended in a lot of other areas really, really well, especially when compared to that first game. Florida was not banging threes like they were in that first game. The front court was really the problem for Auburn in that first matchup. Condon and Thomas Houck didn't do nearly as much. Condon scores 1 point and fouls out. I mean, it's you sort of mitigated all of those other issues. And like you said, Patrick, when Florida had a 4-point lead late in the game, that was their largest lead of the entire game when they went up by 4. Now, obviously, they built on it, but to that point in the game, that was their largest lead. I mean, when Chad Baker-Mazar hits that 3, he puts Auburn back up. And like you said, he hits that shot, and it was at the conclusion of so much gravity for Walter Clayton and so many big moments from on the other end. And you're exactly right. It was Auburn was still within striking distance. Now, what they did down the stretch is they gave a lot of those opportunities away. Chad Baker-Mazar gets called for a late travel in the game. Janai Broome gets called for a late offensive foul in the game. Janai Broome goes 0 for 2 at the foul line. And not only that, but the rebound was up for grabs, goes out of bounds, and it goes Florida's way. And I think that's just an example. I think you and I were talking about it after the game. Florida won down the stretch. They won the bigger moments.
Yeah.
And you couldn't necessarily pinpoint that on a stat sheet or a box score because, like you said, Florida really didn't lead by that much, but it was just offensive rebounds in the second half, timely turnovers. Our buddy Graham Hall from our 24/7 site covering Florida, they had the whiteboard up in their locker room. I think they call them stops. Kills is 3 straight stops, 3 straight defensive possessions where the opponent doesn't score. They only had 1 of those in the first half. Florida did. They had 6 of those in the second half. But going back to Clayton, I mean, Stephen Pearl talked about it after the game. Half of those shots, he was just incredible. Like, he was just doing incredible stuff. But the other half, Auburn didn't feel like they did a good enough job creating a wall back in transition. And on the other side, Patrick, having a guy like Elijah Martin back for Florida in this game, Florida didn't have him in that first meeting, I thought really made a big difference. You could start to see, I know Bruce Pearl talked about fatigue after the game. Same number of players in these lineups for Auburn and Florida, but I think when you talk about the word fatigue, Florida had, I think they were kind of able to flex their muscles here of like a little bit more athleticism, a little bit more potency to get out and run, and once it started becoming Florida's type of game in the second half, out and running, getting a little more chaotic. That is not what Auburn wanted. But it was the opposite in the first half.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is like the first half, it was so different from that first game. It was the half-court game. Yeah. Auburn was slowing it down. They got up 10. Both teams kind of started hot, but then it really kind of turned into that defensive war, which you thought favored Auburn. Yeah. But in all of those big moments, and really when Florida went on the run, it's when the fast break points came back. It's when they were able to start running up and down the court. And yeah, I just think that's where the fatigue hits in, and Pearl really harped on that, and I think my thought on it was more of like, yeah, like you could do the whole it's been a long season thing, but I do wonder, like at some point, and they've been playing, I guess, a smaller rotation in March, but like when you are consistently only playing 20 or so, like everyone's not playing as many minutes because you can rotate in more people throughout the season. Like, yeah, that does save you for the postseason, but also when you get to the postseason, are you maybe not as used to going for 30 or some extended amount of time? Now, granted, most of Auburn's best players have done that at parts during the season, so it's not completely abnormal. But yeah, you definitely saw in the second half. I mean, Pearl said it. He was like, we were just losing ball. I mean, like things that hadn't really been happening all season came to life.
Sure. 18 points was a team high for Chad Baker-Mazara in this game. I thought kind of a heroic performance in a certain way of him. His hand in the locker room looked like it had an apple under it because he told me that he went for a ball against Michigan State, and they said it on the broadcast. He had a torn ligament in his thumb. Plays through that, makes a couple early three-pointers, obviously leads Auburn in scoring in this game. But Patrick, I think we knew Janai Broome was going to have to be the best player on the floor in order for Auburn to win. He absolutely was not. He did a lot of great things there in the first half, 12 points, but only 3 points for him after halftime, 1 of 4 shooting. In a game where Auburn really needed to just have the opportunity to just dump it down to him because there was so much chaos, there was so many other things being created. Auburn felt really uncomfortable on offense in the second half when they got into their half-court sets. You needed to have that reliability. But the thing was, though, that I think Florida did a good job of hedging him off and making him get rid of the ball because, I mean, only 3 points in the second half, sure, but it's not like he was chucking up shots. It's not like he was the focal point over and over again. He only goes 1 of 4 from the floor. But yeah, I mean, the turnover problems extended to everybody. 3 different players, Broome, Baker-Mazara, and Todd Pettiford, had 3 turnovers in this game. And like we were talking about, I mean, it really uncharacteristic performance for this Auburn team. But as we'll sort of get into now, because now the season's over, it's wild that the run has finally come to an end for the best season in Auburn history. But it obviously, the way it ends here, did not dampen at all anything that they had accomplished throughout the season. You knew that, look, they were the underdog today. You knew it was going to take a really, really good performance to take down this Florida team, but it doesn't dampen it, and it's certainly not the 2019 Virginia loss where it was like all of a sudden heartbreaking. And anytime you lose, it's bad, but like it feels bad. This was more, I think, a frustrating, like, slow death in the second half because it became apparent over the course of those 20 minutes that you don't have players that can keep up with Walter Clayton, or they weren't playing to that ability to be able to keep up with him. Your guys were getting fatigued. Janai Broome is not 100% healthy with that elbow. Everything sort of piled on top of each other, and I think over the last 10, 15 minutes of the game, even though Auburn had its opportunities, it was clear Florida was the team that was obviously destined to be able to play for a championship on Monday.
Yeah, and that was just kind of the thing, was like talking with multiple players, Chad in particular, who's like, I mean, yeah, like I'm banged up, my thumb hurts, and other guys are banged up, but like when the lights turn on, like you just got to go with what you have. Everyone's a little bit banged up at this point in the season. And so, I mean, yeah, they didn't really make that an excuse. They're just like, look, at the end of the day, like, we weren't able to do what it took to win. And yeah, I just think that was the thing. It's like Florida immediately answered with that run, and Auburn just, despite it, like, there were some lead changes of like Florida up by 1, Auburn up by 1, whatever, but Auburn was really never able to get that punch back. Yeah. And I think that was kind of the thing that was interesting, and then it just became apparent as we went longer into the game of like, okay, like this is going to be it. The road is going to end here. Yeah,
I mean, Florida just had more dagger moments toward the end. But the funny thing is, I mean, there was opportunities for Auburn there at the end of the game. thanks to the free throw line. Todd Pettiford makes 2 free throws. Thomas Houck down on the other end misses 2 free throws. Chinaloo gets the offensive rebound and then it's fouled. So it's like you have these little opportunities, and I think it goes back to what we were talking about, Florida being able to grab those moments that Auburn obviously couldn't. And so 79-73, the season is now over for the Auburn Tigers, the number 1 overall seed, their second Final Four in program history. We've been talking about this since last week, that this is the best team in program history, and I think a lot of the guys after the game were definitely latching onto that fact, that they were a part of the greatest season ever at Auburn, and it's pretty unequivocal at this point. You can't really argue any which way. This was. We were talking about it earlier. This is the closest they've come to a national championship. They were at the exact same stage in 2019, but this team was different. This team was no, they have championship pedigree all season. But also, Patrick, talking to guys in the locker room after the game, this was a special team for a lot of other reasons. Really, really experienced. They're not going to be like this next year in terms of how many guys, how many seniors, older guys, and so guys like Janai Broom. He was really torn up after the game, really torn up, and Chris Moore and Dylan Cardwell had tears in their eyes. This was, even aside from 32 wins, aside from an SEC title, aside from making the Final Four, this was a really, really special Auburn basketball season, and obviously for us it was really fun to go along on that ride, but I think all of these guys understand the moment. I know it was heartbreaking for them tonight. They understand that they were a part of something that frankly had never been done at Auburn before this season. That
was the thing. Pearl said it in the press conference, and several of them said it, of this has been Auburn's best season, so thankful to be a part of it. And I think Dylan Cardwell said it best. He's I feel like we checked every box we really could have, except for the national championship, and that's the thing that'll sting. But yeah, it is, as you've said, you can't really argue it was the best team Auburn's ever had. And I think, and we've said it multiple times this week, of that 19 team, it was fun, they made it to the Final Four, but it was congratulations, you made it. They were a 5 seed.
They were Cinderella.
Yeah, they were the Cinderella team. They beat all the Bluegrass, whatever. This team, it was and we knew from very early on, if they make it to the Final Four, it's because they really can win the national championship here. Maybe a little unfortunate for them that they did have to run up against 3 other number 1 seeds.
That's the thing.
And you didn't get some Cinderella 5 or some other team that you got to play later in this round. They really did play, I guess. Did they play the highest potential seed every time? I guess Michigan was a 5 instead of a 4, but
close to it.
Other than that,
Creighton was a 9, but Creighton was better than
Louisville, so but they played pretty tough teams the whole way through. But I still think that doesn't negate. And the sting will hurt tonight and tomorrow morning when they all wake up. But I think when they look back, and that's what a lot of them said, is what they accomplished. Chris Moore was kind of consoling with Janai there for a second. He was think of all that we got to do this season. Think of where you led us. You forget because it's been such a long season. And even us working it, it's on to the next game, previewing the next game, whatever. It's been 5 months of it. It's they beat Houston, who's playing for the national championship tomorrow and could win it. They beat them in November. They won Maui. They won the hardest SEC regular season. They won at Lexington for the first time. They won the 1-2 game. So there's so many stops along the way where it's when you look back on the season, it's going to hurt to lose to Florida for a second straight time. That's a hump I guess you couldn't get over in the end. But it was such a special moment. There's so many moments all throughout the season and the postseason that is, I think, what is going to overwhelmingly be what is remembered.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Like you mentioned, that 19 team. I don't think personally very often about the way it ended. I don't think many people really do. What you think about is the crazy run that they had in March. How fun those players were, and it'll be fun to be able to zoom back out now that the season is over. Obviously, it's really disappointing for them and for this fan base to not be able to play for a national championship. But I think you brought up a really good point, though. It is unfortunate for them, I will say, not to give an out here, but the chalk here and playing undeniably the other 3 best teams in the country. Not that a Cinderella or somebody lower seeded can't come here and win, because of course they can, but it's if you're Auburn, you were going to need to be on your A game today, and if you had advanced, you would have needed to be absolutely on your game to win a title.
And that's true for whoever does win. It's Houston had to have their A game today, and they did. Florida had to, and they did. If Florida hadn't played their game, they might not have won.
Yeah.
So
it's obviously a tough road now, or it's a tough finish for Auburn at the end of this road. But an incredible season. Again, 32 wins is a program record. I thought you encapsulated it really well of everything this team has accomplished this year. And so now we move into the off season. Just crazy to say, because I feel like we've been in this grind so much from the very beginning of the season of documenting every single one of these games. And one of these post game pods we did at 3 in the morning in Maui while it was Thanksgiving break after one of those games, and just flipped it right back around. So I mean, it's been a super wild ride, and we are definitely super appreciative of everybody for tuning into these after the game. I'm very appreciative of Patrick for putting together these YouTube videos after the game, and Patrick, it's been a super fun season. I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Yep, the road ends here at the Final Four. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's what was so exciting about the season, is like covering it. It's like, oh, it would be really cool if they like won in Maui and you got to cover that. It'd be really cool, and they really did hit every bench point. And
they
we
just extended the leash over.
And it's like we kind of got to the point where it was like, oh, it'd be like fun if we could go cover the Sweet 16. Like, we'll see how this team does. And then we got to Atlanta. It was like, it'd be really cool if we could like, you know, go cover the Final Four.
Yeah, but I'm not greedy. But like, really cool.
What if they did? And so like, we really did get to hit every single benchmark.
Yeah,
and so to end it, I mean, I guess like what we started at the Auburn Vermont game at Neville Arena, and we ended at the Final Four. Pretty cool season.
Yeah, incredible season for Auburn. Ends in a loss tonight to the Florida Gators, who will play Houston. We stepped outside of the press room to watch the end of that game against Duke, and it was absolutely insane. So should be a good title game on Monday. Incredible season for the Auburn Tigers comes to a close here in San Antonio. For Patrick Bingham, I am Nathan King. Thank you guys so much for joining us on the Postgame Pod all season, and stay over at auburnundercover.com. We've had tons of stuff up tonight. I'm going to have a bunch of post-mortem type stories tomorrow, looking into the offseason, looking at what the roster needs to be like. Still a ton to write here from an emotional night in San Antonio, and rightfully so for this Auburn team, as their season has now come to a close. We will catch you guys later, auburnundercover.com and on the Auburn Undercover podcast. Talk to y'all soon.
I could be sarcastic.
These people are in pain.